Good morning, everybody. My name is Vicki DeBlasi. I'm the head of marketing at UK5G, and I am going to be your host this morning. This is the second in a series of 4 events that we are running in association with DCMS for place leaders and place makers to help you on your digital connectivity journey. This session, we are joined by a fantastic panel of guests who are going to be covering some of the key technology developments and new models around 5G that places can benefit from being aware of and considering in your digital connectivity strategies and plans. So, if I can get my slides to work, our agenda this morning looks a little bit like this. So first off, we will be welcoming Catherine from Cellnex, who will be talking to us about private networks. Kenny from University of Strathclyde will be delving into a little bit more detail and exploring neutral hosts. And then Jessam from DCMS will be talking to us a little bit about the support that's available from central government for local authorities, regional authorities and LEPs. And we'll then be having a panel session with each of our panelists. This is an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you might have. You'll all be very familiar to online events at this point in time, I'm sure. So if you have any questions for any of the individual speakers or for the group as a whole, please do put them in the chat box as we go through, and we will tackle those for you when we get to the panel session. So before we get started, a brief introduction to UK5G for those of you who may not be familiar with us. So we are a innovation network. We are funded by DCMS, but we exist as an impartial entity. And our remit essentially is to accelerate the adoption and deployment of 5G across all 4 nations. We do this in 3 ways. First of all, we support the development of the ecosystem as a whole. So that's working with both the telecoms industry, but also with the places and industry sectors that can benefit from 5G. And events like this are part of that to help to raise the awareness and understanding of what 5G can do, the benefits it can bring you, and most importantly, how you can actually get it. We exist as a platform to promote information and learning about the various 5G activities, projects, trials and deployments that take place across the UK and those that we can benefit from in terms of learnings overseas. And thirdly, we are responsible for promoting the capabilities that we have within the UK on the global stage. We are a membership organisation, and not surprisingly, I'm going to say to you that if you're not already a member, please do sign up. We have a very active membership. We have a number of different working groups that explore 5G from a number of different angles. We do have a Connected Places working group, most relevant to our audience here today, but we have others that cover a range of topics from security through to creative industries and our most recent one, climate and environment. We have a very active marketing engine as well. So members receive regular newsletters. We hold a series of events. We also support DCMS with any kind of policy initiatives or competitions. And we produce a quarterly magazine, the Innovation Briefing magazine. So if you haven't signed up to be a member yet, then I would very much encourage you to do so. Most relevant to yourselves is something that we recently launched on the UK5G website at the end of last year, which is our new Place Hub. So there is a section on the website, you can see the URL on the bottom of your screen there, which is around 5G in places. Now, this is a sort of one-stop shop to enable you to, first of all, explore the various 5G projects and deployments that have been taking place or are taking place in your particular region. And it really focuses very much on the how of digital connectivity and infrastructure. So we went through a process last year of speaking to local authorities up and down the country, those that are part of the 5G testbed and trials program, but also very deliberately those that aren't as well, to understand what is being done with regards to not just 5G, but advanced connectivity as a whole. and we sourced and collated insights, guides, and assets relating to 4 key topics that you told us were important to you. How to engage your local community, all things related to infrastructure, coordination, leadership, and execution. So once you've decided what your plans are, how do you actually make it happen? And procurement and partnerships, so specifically looking at things like PFI contracts, standardized agreements, how to get the best between working between public and private sectors. So I'd really encourage you, if you haven't already had a look at that, to have an investigate and a read through that section of the site. There's lots of guides and toolkits that you can download, as well as panel sessions from those who've been there, done that, so that you can benefit really from all of the learnings that they've done. It's a very pragmatic part of the site. We talk as much about kind of what didn't work, things to avoid, potential banana skins, as well as things that do work, so that you can benefit from all of those hard-won learnings to help to potentially fast track and smooth your path to delivering 5G and other advanced connectivity solutions. So that's it from my perspective. I think without further ado, let's jump into what you're really here to hear about, which is some of these new sort of deployment models. And first of all, we have got Catherine Gull from Cellnex. Catherine, over to you.
Great, thanks, Vicki. Really appreciate the introduction and super introduction from you. My name is Catherine Gull, and I am with a company called Cellnex. Just a little bit about me before we get started. I have been working in the telecoms business in the US and the UK for the last longer than I'm willing to admit. I'd say probably 25 years. I've been in the UK for 20 years, so I'm very much in the UK business. 8 years ago, I started working on private networks before private networks were a thing, and helping to deploy a private network at Heathrow Airport, the Port of Felixstowe, and other places. So let me tell you a little bit about Cellnex first. Cellnex is a 36 billion euro company. It's actually based in Spain, and actually I'm here in Barcelona at the Mobile World Congress today. We are Europe's largest tower co. What that means is that we own over 128,000 sites across Europe, 12 countries, UK included, where mobile operators host we host for the mobile operators their hardware to create their mobile networks. 2 years ago, we bought a company called EDSCOM, and EDSCOM was the market leader, is the market leader in the deployment of private networks. And together with EDSCOM, we have over 40 private networks deployed throughout Europe. And today I'm going to talk to you about private networks, explaining what they are, how they compare to other things, and hopefully what it means to you. So if we can go to the next slide, Vicki. So again, a little bit more about Cellnex, which I've gone through already, some of it. We enable mobile operators to actually have a network. We have sites in large buildings. We have towers and rooftop sites. We also build small cell sites, small cell networks for the mobile operators and other companies. And we are in partnership with another company to manage an IoT solution throughout the UK. But today, again, I'm going to talk to you about private networks. So next slide, please. All right, so what do we need to know about wireless connectivity? And I hope that I clarify, what I'm hoping to do is clarify the difference between things. So we all know Bluetooth. Bluetooth is a standard technology. It doesn't work for very far distances. Then a lot of us think of Wi-Fi as something that just goes for everything. And I have a colleague that says Wi-Fi is for everyone. Wi-Fi is for the general, just for everyone, because you can connect to Wi-Fi whether you have a mobile contract or a mobile subscription or not. You can connect to Wi-Fi with your laptop and all sorts of other variety of devices. And laptops and Wi-Fi works pretty much anywhere. We can have Wi-Fi in the office, at the grocery store, at home, in the manufacturing plants, and actually different places in a city scenario. Then we're going to talk a little bit about cellular mobile, and I'm going to break cellular down into a couple of things. So cellular mobile is licensed spectrum. And generally we think of cellular mobile as what the mobile operators provide, which is they provide a network where they want to and not where we want to. So obviously we have a subscription, so more people, less people than are available to connect to Wi-Fi, but quite a few people have cellular connectivity. So if you had to categorize it, it was Wi-Fi is for many, cellular is less than many, few, and then we get to private wireless, which we'll go to the next slide. So private wireless, we like to say private wireless is for you. So if we look at Wi-Fi, again, this might be a bit redundant, but Wi-Fi is unlicensed spectrum. It's basically indoor with a limited outdoor range. And anyone can connect almost anything to it. You can connect your printer to it, as we said, your laptop, a variety of other things. And then public mobile is where the public mobile operators want to put their network, which means, as many of you who will have rural cities or rural towns will find that a mobile operator you may not have connectivity from all 3 mobile operators or 4 mobile operators, and you may have one and not the other, or you may just have poor mobile connectivity. And it's because mobile operators are driven to put connectivity where the general population is. Next slide. So Wi-Fi is a good solution, but from a mobility perspective, it's not so great. And from a coverage perspective, it's not so great. It requires quite a few access points. The security is set by the user, and sometimes the security is not so great. I had a friend whose son was constantly hacking into Wi-Fi at a variety of different institutions, such as restaurants, grocery stores, because it was easy. Public mobile, much more secure from that perspective, but again, and mobile, so you can actually use it from one access point, let's call it an access point, to another. But again, as I said before, you can't control where it is. Next slide. This is a bit redundant, but public mobile is, again, the bandwidth. You're subject to the mobile operator. I'm going to talk a little bit about the core. So in some cases, with a private mobile network, having a core very close actually helps you manage things like autonomous vehicles and things that require super low latency. With a public network, you get the core where you get the core. You could have varying service levels with a public network. It could be super depending on where you are. And also you are subject to what the mobile operator wants to do. As an example, about a few months ago, I got a message from my public mobile operator that I subscribe to saying that in my neighborhood, they were going to be making changes. And for an entire week in my central London neighborhood, I had no coverage in my flat. And that was because they were making changes. And if I was trying to run my business or my city based on the public mobile network, that would be devastating. As a consumer, I just had to deal with it. So that's one thing about a public mobile network that you will see as a contrast to a private mobile network. Next slide. So what is private wireless? So private wireless, in essence, is a purpose-built licensed spectrum mobile network built for you. It is built based on where you need it, what you need it for, what sort of throughput you need, what you're using it for, and with the availability that you require. So I have another colleague who says that you can actually build a private wireless network for no nines in 100%. And you can get pretty darn close to that with a private wireless edge network. The private wireless network essentially is built based on what you want to do when you want to do it. With 5G and private wireless, you would put the brains of the network near to where the network is built. So as an example, in a city, you would put one or two, so you would have failover network cores, we call them. That's kind of where the brains of the network are, in locations that are close to the deployment of the radio network. What that would do for you is it would enable you to deploy things like autonomous vehicles or thousands of IoT connections, or just connectivity for anything from traffic lights to maintenance workers being able to use AR, VR to maintain various city services. The network is built with high availability, as I said, and it is built to the reliability that you need to have. And the core is actually custom built for how you use it, with voice over IP, without or just data only, and it's scaled actually for the number of devices that you need to use. Next slide, Vicki. So to give you one more example of the comparison between a public network and a private edge connectivity network. Now keep in mind, before I go to this, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, all of this, all is necessary, and all can actually be worked into these together. As an example, a private network could, in some areas, be set up to generate Wi-Fi in areas where you don't have fiber connectivity, but you have power. So you could actually you can put some router up that can generate Wi-Fi. So if we look at the comparison between a public deployment and a private deployment, you've got two maps there. One is before and after. On the before, that is the coverage that you get from the public mobile network. And it's, of course, based on where the mobile operator sees fit to deploy. The coverage is not tailored for you. As you see on the right, on the after side, the coverage is very much tailored for what that customer required. The public network is best effort. They will not put SLAs with it because they are serving millions of customers. The private network is tailored for the requirements that you have. The public network is shared. So what that means is, if for some reason someone in that before public mobile network has, let's say, a festival and the population of that area doubles in size, you might actually clog up the mobile network. That is not the case for the private network because it is dedicated and scaled for the use that you have. The last thing is maintenance. As I said before, you have no control over when a public mobile operator is going to change or maintain something. In the private world, the maintenance is agreed between you and your service provider. And what that means is the service provider says there's a maintenance needs to be done, and an agreement is made as to the time and how it's done, and the failover, reliability, et cetera, is all taken into consideration. Next slide, please. So I want to give you one example. we are working with, so Cellnex is, and you might have heard this because it's been publicly released, Cellnex is working with the Council of Basingstoke and Deane on a very specific deployment in Basingview, which is actually a business area of Basingstoke. The intent is to build a private 5G network to attract business, but it's also to build the private network to look at the mill, reducing failures and improving the maintenance for that mill. They're also looking at we're deploying the 5G network in order to test and trial augmented reality and real-time 360 camera surveillance. The last thing that we're looking to do is to pilot some autonomous vehicles there, so we can bring, using 5G, so we can bring people from that business area to the high street for lunch or back for more shopping, because this is a very business area. But Basingstoke see it as a unique opportunity to draw in new businesses who can use this private 5G to further their business endeavors. Next slide, please. So this gives you an idea of some of the use cases and some of our references for Cellnex. I encourage you to go on UK5G, number one, because it's a terrific resource. Number two, reach out to us. We're happy to have one-to-one phone calls. I'm on the advisory board of UK5G, and although I work for Cellnex, my job very much is to evangelize the use of 5G throughout the UK and really make us a leader throughout the world. I think that's it. I look forward to your questions later. Vicki, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Catherine. That Basingstoke example, I think, is a really interesting one as well. So looking forward to kind of seeing more developments on that front. So we've heard about private networks from Catherine. Now we are going to hand over to Dr. Kenny Barley from University of Strathclyde, who is going to talk to us about neutral host and what that means for places. So Kenny, I will stop sharing and over to you.
There we go. You can see that okay?
We can, yes.
Yes, okay, great. Okay, so hi, my name is Kenny Barley. I work at the University of Strathclyde in the Strath SDR team across a number of different 5G projects, including our flagship one at the moment is 5G New Thinking, where we've built a 40-kilometre square 4G, 5G network up in the Orkney Islands. So in this set of slides, I'm going to give an overview of neutral hosting and basically methods to provide public coverage of a private network, essentially. My slides respond. There we go. So let's start with a quick review of the network terminology. So Catherine has just introduced what private networks and public networks are. So as a quick recap, your private network is basically a closed door network with a limited number of subscribers. The SIM cards for the private network are issued by the network operator, and only those SIM cards are able to connect to it. An example would be a small rural network where there's customers in the area potentially on broadband packages or whatever, or a corporate network where there's not essentially customers, but there's users at the factories and sites, whatever. Public networks, on the other hand, they're very similar, but the main difference is they can serve third parties too. And an example of a public network is a national MNO. The national MNO still has its own private network. It's still got its own SIM cards, but it can serve third parties through international roaming. Or another example is a small infill network that's provided at a train station or an airport, and it provides coverage on behalf of the MNOs and serves the MNO customers. So all the sort of slides and all the diagrams I'm going to present from this point forward are from a campus network point of view. So all of you can sort of imagine a geographically small network, for example, a network in a rural community. So this is a typical campus network. It's got base stations, which are connected over a backhaul to the core network. The backhaul is a mix of fiber and microwave radio links or whatever. Your core network is connected to the backbone fiber internet connection, and you've got a bunch of UEs, your user equipment, which is all running with SIM cards. So to build a typical private campus network, the operator will deploy 4G, 5G base stations, which of course require radio spectrum licenses. They'll deploy a 4G, 5G core, and they'll deploy SIM cards, which are then put into the user equipment. Now it's a limited coverage area, and devices will show no service when you take them outside of that coverage area. And the key thing to note about this private network setup is it cannot serve third parties. So if someone with a Vodafone SIM card arrives, they will not be able to connect to this base station. Now, if they wanted to provide service to third parties off this network, you basically need to take your campus network and kind of turn it into a public network. So there's two techniques that you can use for this. There's inbound roaming, which is also known as not spot roaming in some situations, and neutral hosting. Now, there's a fair bit of confusion floating around in the UK at the moment because we've got groups referring to both of these things as neutral hosting, but they are architecturally different and they provide different end user experiences. So I'm going to explain what they are separately. We've also got variations of these two technologies, which are used for indoor small cell distributed antenna DAS systems, which are used in the likes of the higher floors of skyscrapers and Canary Wharf and things like that, and indoor service at airports and train stations. But we'll ignore DAS for now because it's slightly different. So the first technique I'm going to talk about is inbound roaming. So here we still have our base station owned by our campus operator. We've still got our campus core as before, and the network is broadcasting what's called a PLMN. It's basically the network code equivalent to your Wi-Fi SSID. Now the campus core is connected to third-party cores via roaming interconnects. And these are standardized interconnects that all the MNOs around the world use for roaming purposes. And with this setup, it means third-party MNO UEs, so your Vodafones, your EE SIM cards, all that kind of stuff, they can roam into your network, connect through back to their core, and then get online. And that means they can make calls, send texts, and get on the internet. And an example of this that everyone can relate to is international roaming. So if we think about this from the UK point of view, we've got Vodafone UK public network. It has got a SIM card and a subscriber from Italy has come along and they're on the TIM network, and they are able to roam via the Vodafone core back to the TIM core and get online. It's not the best quality service. You'll normally be limited to 3G or whatever, but it works, and that's what all of us use when we go abroad. So if we look at sort of the pros and cons of this inbound roaming setup, third-party UEs can connect, they can roam, they can make calls, send text, get online. That's positive. Architecturally, it's pretty simple. You just connect your campus core network to third-party operator networks using the standard roaming interconnects. And there's a potential for a sort of new service provider to sort of be formed here, which is able to provide an inbound roaming core as a service. And what that could mean is your campus operator puts out their base stations, subscribes to this core as a service feature, and then the core as a service has someone managing it who deals with all the MNOs and has all the interconnections between them all. So it means that all that work is done for you, and building the network could be very simple. Cons with this setup is the third-party UE will take several minutes to connect on arriving. So if you think when you're in an airplane, you just landed in some foreign country, you turn off flight mode, it could be like 5 minutes before you get that text through saying welcome to Spain or whatever. And that's because your phone is going through a sort of polling loop of searching for its home network. And when it can't find its home network, it then starts looking at all the other ones and finds one to connect. And eventually it will find one, and it will. So that's something you need to be aware of for the inbound roaming situation. If you've got marginal home network coverage in the area, the UE will probably camp on that rather than joining the campus network. So let's say you're in the fringes of coverage in your rural community and there's a little bit of 2G here and there from one of the operators. The phones will stay attached to that rather than connecting to your super fancy 4G, 5G network. And at the coverage fringe, so when you go between the campus network and the MNO's network coverage areas, there's no clean handover. So that basically means you will drop calls, the internet will go offline, and the phone will go into that back off period again while it searches for the operators. So that's not great. And one particular issue with that is it will drop 999 calls if you go across that fringe. There's some technical and regulatory issues as well, but we'll come back to that in a second. The alternative method for enabling public access on this campus network is to use neutral hosting. So here, we basically have the base station connected to multiple third-party core networks, and it broadcasts each of those core network PLMNs. So it's broadcasting the Vodafone network, and it's broadcasting the EE network, etc. And it's completely transparent to the end user. You know, it is their home network that's on the ground. And the sort of big architectural difference with this is that the campus network doesn't even need its own core. It doesn't need its own SIMs in this situation, because it's not running its own network essentially. It's just hosting the other operators over the top. So pros and cons of this one. Third-party MNO UEs can connect to this campus network, and you know, they believe it's their home network. They can make calls, send text, get online, all good. They will connect instantly, and they will connect to whichever base station is the highest power. So, you know, as I mentioned before, on this sort of coverage fringe, it will always go to whichever base station is sort of broadcasting the loudest. And clean handover is possible. Because we're sort of at a 4G interconnect level, there's frameworks in place to allow the user to basically be passed between your base station and the operator's base stations. So as someone leaves that coverage fringe and then transitions between the networks, they can maintain calls and texts and data connections and all that kind of stuff. Cons of this, it's architecturally quite a lot more complicated. And there's various network security challenges, which is something that the MNOs are always concerned about. It will likely require multiple sets of sort of VPN routing equipment and potentially multiple radios on the mast if the operators are unwilling to let you share physical radios between multiple operators. The campus operator will need to work with the MNOs and get them to agree to this neutral hosting setup. And it will need to be via something which is kind of JOTS style. Now, JOTS it's a neutral hosting framework, which has been developed by all the operators in the UK for neutral host in building. And you know, it's in building. It's designed for small cells placed, for example, throughout a shopping centre. It's not designed for macro outdoor coverage. So there'll need to be some slight variations on the JOTS framework, which, you know, no doubt will be a fair bit of effort to sort of get that tweaked to make it suitable for outdoor use. Again, there's technical and regulatory issues, which we'll come back to. So if we just compare these two options, the inbound roaming and the neutral hosting. So inbound roaming, much easier to implement. And if that third-party core as a service operator came into play, it's dead simple to implement this. The other option is neutral hosting. And you know, neutral hosting is a far cleaner, far better service, but far more complicated to build. With both options, you've got various business-to-business models possible, because the campus operator is essentially doing the MNO a favor, you know, by providing EE coverage in a rural community for the first time. You're giving EE access to new customers. You're giving them a number more kilometers squared of coverage, which, you know, gets Ofcom off their backs for, you know, increasing their coverage across the UK. So there's, you know, different business models available. So you could maybe charge the MNO couple of £100 per kilometre squared per month of coverage, or you could charge them £1 per gigabyte of data served through your network, for example. Now, I'll add, I've not personally tested these models because all of our work with MNOs in this field has only been at testbed level so far. So as I mentioned, there's some technical and regulatory issues. So technical issues, first of all. No UK operator has yet deployed 5G standalone commercially. So that means that if you built a 5G standalone campus network, you would not be able to offer either roaming or neutral host connectivity on it just now because there's no one to connect to. Pure 5G standalone networks will also use voice over NR for calling. And the slight issue with that is voice over NR has only just left the lab and it's not really made its way into handsets, and it will be years before handsets sort of catch up across the UK and everyone has handsets that are capable of that. So basically, if you build a 5G SA campus network, and even if the MNOs deploy their cores, you won't be able to support calling, which is a bit of an issue. So if we focus right now on 4G and 5G non-standalone, which is probably where most networks will be for the next 5-6 years. Right now, a significant portion of the UK customer base cannot make 4G VoLTE because they're virtual network operators. That's the likes of the EE, the Tesco, Asda, all that kind of stuff. the GIFGAF rather, not E, they run on top of the MNOs. None of them support VoLTE calling. And this means that with either the inbound roaming or the neutral host, none of those MVNO UEs will be able to make calls. So that's again a bit of a deal breaker if you're doing MNO negotiations. So right now, unbelievably, the only solution we have in the UK is to deploy circuit switch fallback networks with 2G or 3G. And this would mean that your campus network needs to feature 2G and 3G radios, which could literally double the cost of your build. And if you're doing the inbound roaming setup, you will also need a 2G or 3G circuit switch core with its own roaming interconnects as well. And the regulatory issue. So right now, due to regulations surrounding the emergency calling, any network operator that's operating for public service in the UK needs to support the current UEs and also the old UEs that are deployed all over the place. And also the MNOs, the other rival MNOs and the rival MVNOs, and potentially people who happen to be in the country doing international roaming at that point in time. So basically, when you put all that together, it means that they must feature 2G or 3G radios for 999 calling right now. And it's going to remain that way until Ofcom updates the rules. So in this set of slides, I've introduced public-private campus network architectures, demonstrated the different solutions that allow service to the third-party UEs, discussed the pros and cons of the two options. And the main takeaway is this stuff is not as easy as it seems. There is a lot of historical problems need to be dealt with. To get rid of that 2G, 3G requirement today, people will need to get new phones, which is not something that can be enforced upon people. It just needs to happen naturally as people replace devices. The MNOs, or the MVNOs, all need to alter their core networks so that they support VoLTE calling. And Ofcom needs to change the emergency calling rules. Now, the UK operators have said they're going to be keeping 2G, 3G alive until 2033. And I think that's partly to do with the fact that the new smart meters that have been rolled out are running over 2G. So if they switch it all off, that's going to kill all the smart meters. So therefore, circuit switch fallback support is probably going to be on the table until then, if plans don't change. And we are kind of a long way from being able to offer 5G standalone neutral hosting in the UK. But all is not lost. Because there's been lots of recent changes going on from Ofcom, RE, enabling shared spectrum. So it's actually becoming possible for the WE network operator to go and build networks now. And we've got innovative UK companies are working on solutions to all these problems. And we're now at the stage where real world solutions are now becoming available for outdoor 2G plus 4G radios and 2G plus 4G roaming cores. And real world outdoor neutral hosting will happen because there's a very strong appetite from it across the UK. And Virgin Media O2 was the first UK MNO to trial indoor JOTS, and they did that in the sort of tail end of last year. So this is coming, so it will sort itself out. And the final thing is, if the emergency calling regulations get updated by Ofcom, that will sort of begin a cycle of, pushing everything into VoLTE, which will then make designing these networks a lot easier. So that's me. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kenny. Really kind of comprehensive introduction, and I think it's really helpful to kind of show those pros and cons. One of the things that we try to do at UK5G is to be pragmatic about stuff. We're not trying to sort of, sprinkle glitter over everything. We want to make sure that we are honest and open about kind of some of the challenges. One of the great things about us as a network is that we do have access to incredibly clever people like Kenny, like Catherine, who understand these complexities, understand the challenges, and are there to kind of offer help and support for places as they are navigating their way around this complexity. On that note then, I am very glad to now be able to introduce you all to our next speaker, Jason from DCMS, who is going to talk to us about, hang on, there's a small slide challenge. Bear with me just 1 second whilst I didn't want to dive through. We'll hand over to Jason, who is going to talk to us about the specific support that's available for local authorities from a central government perspective. So Jason, over to you.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And I'm obviously very keen to kind of talk about what we're doing, because we do hear that where we provide support, it is good, but not everyone's aware of it. So yeah, you could go to the next slide, please. And let's get that one, because I guess that kind of makes the same point. But yeah, there are a few things that we're doing. The first is guidance. So the main port of guidance that we provide is the digital connectivity portal. I'd be happy if anyone's interested to share the link for that piece of guidance on the gov.uk website. So it's a variety of things, really. It's best practice for both telecoms operators, but especially for local authorities. Is it really aimed at local authorities? The idea is we provide, advice, guidance, ideas of how best to enable digital connectivity to the whole local authority, and that's everyone that's going to be involved. So that's the planning department who'll be involved in signing off mobile masts and small cells. That's the highways authority, the highways teams, who will be involved in enabling streetworks to allow fibre to be laid into the ground. And then legal teams who have to interpret the legislation that we have out there, like the Electronic Communications Code, housing and estates teams, a whole wide variety. So the idea is, if anyone within a local authority needs some information about how best to enable digital connectivity, we will provide that online. And another thing is we're going to revamp that later in the year. So we've had, I'm getting a lot of feedback lately, but we've had feedback that where people know where to look for this guidance, it's very helpful, but it's not always the most accessible or easy to navigate. So my team is planning a refresh of it to just really expressly lay out the benefits of enabling digital connectivity as well. So one example that we saw in London was a particular planning department understood how important it was enabling 5G connectivity and increasing kind of mass concentration to make sure that enough capacity was there for the benefits that were needed. But residents weren't really aware of that, and some of them were quite vocal against it. So it's just stuff like that, practical things that local authorities, a variety of local authorities come up against when trying to enable this connectivity. That piece of guidance, we're going to be pushing it out far and wide through a variety of sources, particularly through things like combined authorities, like the Local Government Association, and a few more ways in the coming weeks and months. So look out for further communications from that. If you have a command authority overarching from your council. Next slide, please, Vicky. Webinars. This is something we're going to be doing a lot more of. So this is, again, more practical advice, because that's more feedback that we're hearing a lot of. There is a lot of theory, and there is a lot of emphasis on the fact that digital connectivity is important for local authorities, but sometimes we're lacking on, well, what do I actually do in this situation? How do I tell my residents about this? How do I talk about how the different departments within our council about why this is important and how we enable it? And it's just trying to get experts from around the whole kind of connectivity community. So that's telecoms operators, that's a whole variety of different people, and people within local authorities as well that have done really well in rolling this out, that have sort of led on it. Just to kind of explain how to deal with some of these difficulties. A good example is a webinar on the 9th of March, so next week, which is going to deal with a couple of things. One of them is, what is 5G, and kind of drilling down into that in more detail, and talking about how you get round, you kind of navigate enabling it from a practical perspective. And the second part of it will concentrate around health. So we've seen quite a lot, actually, up and down the country. A lot of people saying that residents think that 5G is harmful to health, is going to be problematic. They don't want more masks. So it's just kind of breaking that down with official guidance from Public Health England, things like that. There will be more of these webinars planned. We'll try and do them fairly regularly. And the idea is not only to get an idea of what to do, but to make connections with people that can help you do it, right, within the telecoms industry and other local authorities that are a little bit more advanced. Next slide, please, Vicky. Third major facet of this is the cross-stakeholder group workshops that we're running at DCMS. So that's everyone being at the table, everyone that you might need to speak to if you're within a local authority and you have something that you land on your desk to do with connectivity, or something's not landed on your desk, but you know this is a priority, you know you need to be developing a strategy around it. So DCMS run workshops that include site providers, local authorities, or local authority representatives, people from combined authorities and some regional partnerships, telecoms companies, landowners, everyone that is involved in rolling out connectivity. There are different strands to these workshops. Some are around interpreting regulations, others are around developing way leave templates, as we know that is a major stumbling block in some cases. Sorry. So we're just trying to standardize that or find some circumstances where we can have standardized templates. But again, the emphasis on that is building relationships within the groups. So, for example, not fairly recently, we had an event that came out of these workshops, which was a company called City Fibre, who rolled out fixed line connectivity, fibre in the ground, and they were just explaining how they developed a template where they've kind of used it, the local authorities they've used it in conjunction with, and how it's helped make things easier for everyone, make everyone's life easier. So start to standardize that and start to make this less of a drain on people's time and less of a black hole in terms of information and where to start, just making it a little bit easier on everyone. Next slide, please. And just kind of following into that, regional events, these are more ad hoc and goes around how we're looking to work with local authorities. So we want to be able to reach absolutely everyone all the time, but that's not necessarily going to be practical, as to give every local authority the kind of care and time that is needed to develop a digital strategy and move forward with it and get around practical problems. We do need to go through things like sub-regional partnerships in London, like Central London Forward, for example, and the South London Partnership, or combined authorities like the Manchester Authority, or groups like the again, local government association, like the Department for Levelling Up, that's been in the news a fair bit, and where we get feedback that there are particular areas that are of difficulty for certain councils. We will sometimes go perhaps to the telecoms industry and say things like, people don't know about the benefits that 5G give. Can you explain? People don't understand the process that a fixed line telecoms company has to go through when trying to lay fibre in the ground, about their planning process, about the information that they don't have when planning. Can you just enlighten us on that a little bit? So the idea of events like these are to gain mutual understanding in a particular area, because everywhere in the country is different. There are differences in what councils have to consider from one council to the other within a certain region, let alone across the UK. So it's just trying to be a little bit more specific, but still talking about things that more than one councillor is asking for. So we're trying to do a variety of different things. Next slide, please, Vicky. Yeah, and that's kind of touching on what I just led on there. This is really how we look to communicate. So the way we want to do things is, if you have a relationship with groups like ADEPT, with groups like, if you're in London, local London or Central London Forward or whatever it is, if you speak regularly to your combined authority, or if you have links into the local government association, speak to them. Just kind of say, we're thinking about digital connectivity, we have a particular problem, reach out to them and they will reach out to us. We have regular conversations with many of these groups. We're looking to increase that activity significantly over the next year and coming years. And we want to hear what people's actual problems are, because I think it's easy sometimes that we in central government have an idea of what people find difficulty with. And we hear feedback from these groups about what's happening on the ground, and sometimes it's completely different. So yeah, really keen to kind of hear what people have going on, what they want to see more of. Honest feedback is always fantastic, because if we're going to enable connectivity, we kind of need to hear what we could be doing better as well. But that's all from me. A fairly high level touch on what we're offering and what we do.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Justin. Much appreciated kind of overview there of that central government support that is available. So I'm now going to invite all of our speakers back in for a panel discussion. I've seen we've had some really great questions coming through from the group, which is fantastic. So I think what we will do is we will tackle some of those specific questions first off to make sure that we get time to cover all of those. It looks like we've got a variety in here. So very simple one to start us off. Can you confirm the slides will be circulated? Yes, I can. So that one's a nice easy one. I can ask and answer that one. Okay, so first one, Kenny, this might be a question for you. Catherine, you might have some views on this too. Question on campus networks. Given the challenges just comprehensively outlined, doesn't a Wi-Fi campus network make more sense right now versus a neutral host 234 5G? Kenny, I think I'm going to throw that one to you to tackle first off.
Yeah. Okay, so definitely for a geographically small campus network, such as coverage at a factory site or whatever, or council offices, yeah, Wi-Fi definitely has a place and will be far cheaper to implement and will be far less of a headache. If you want to build a network that is a little bit larger, you know, over multiple kilometers, then that's where 4G, 5G and everything else sort of comes into play.
Brilliant, thank you. Next one, neutral host deployment with DAS model is quite a success recently, with the investment coming from landlords rather than MNOs. Do you see this trend set to continue? So Catherine and Kenny, probably throw that one at both at you.
I mean, I think Kenny would probably agree. The trend is continuing, and it's essentially the landlords taking control of the situation and being able to offer to their customers, their tenants, certain connectivity, and in some cases, even the tenants drawing down a DAS to offer connectivity either with one mobile operator or a multiple of mobile operators. So yes, but it costs money. So, and MNOs are not willing, unless they see a financial benefit, to actually bring their stuff to a site, let's say an office building, etc. Kenny.
Yeah, there was a recent study done by a business analysis company. I cannot remember which one, but it was reckoning that by providing DAS in the higher floors of buildings, it is significantly increasing the property's value, you know, in terms of rent for, you know, offices or whatever that are in the building. Because the issue with the tall building situation is all the national operators deploy their masts on buildings, let's say 5, 6 floors up or whatever, with their antennas pointing down at the streets, and that means that people sort of above those floors get nothing. So that's where DAS has sort of come into play.
Brilliant, thank you both. Question, Justin, for you. So this is a really interesting one that's come through about barrier busting from a local authority perspective. So individuals saying we still face a lot of issues relating to 5G mast siting, even after working with MNOs at the pre-app stage, where applications are not taking pre-application advice into account and ultimately are then rejected. So what barrier busting support is offered by central governments to MNOs and their agents? This is a really interesting one.
It's a great question, yeah. And sometimes we have to be careful with the term barrier busting, because I think it can feel like local authorities are the barrier, and that's absolutely categorically not the case. And I also kind of want to make the point that it's not that local authorities don't know what they're doing, get in the way all the time. Sometimes, as Martin really clearly lays out, it's sometimes understanding on the other side isn't quite good enough. So what I'd really encourage you, Martin, to do is get involved in those workshops. If you kind of want to leave your details after this, you know, through Vicki or however the best way to do so is, I can kind of have a conversation with you about the workshops and put you in touch with Sudawan, who runs them. But yeah, we do often make the point to MNOs that they do also need to educate their the guys that are putting their planning applications to a greater extent, and understand some of the pressures that planning authorities are under. Things like opposition from residents, the fact that you guys have competing priorities from loads of different types of applications, the fact that actually sometimes quite technical information is kind of submitted to you, and you're kind of expected to know it when it's only a small part of your total remit in terms of from a telecoms perspective. So it's a great question. We do hold regular conversations with the MNOs, and I promise you it's not all a one-way street. It is very much that they also need to make more of an effort to understand and educate. It's got to be two-way in terms of the knowledge process. Those conversations are a little bit more ad hoc. They're not structured solely around that. They're just in the course of regular meetings that we have with the MNOs of a variety of issues. But absolutely, please, Martin, please, yeah, I've just seen your email. Thank you very much for that. I'll actually add you after this call to those workshops and just reach out to hear more of your ideas as well.
Brilliant, thank you. And I've just seen Martin's added in the chat that personal experience there, finding Cornerstone and MBNL fantastic, but unilateral deployment is inconsistent. Martin, I think what I would add to Jessam's response there as well is that the final event that we're holding in this series is, as I say, around bringing together public and private sector, and we will have on that we're having a couple of fireside chats, one from a local authority perspective. Here's all the things that we want private sector to know, and vice versa. And the second part of that event will be online networking between them, both parties, if you like, to try and kind of help private sector understand some of those challenges and understand the reality of your requirements and from your perspective. So it might be that will be a good one for you to attend, to put your case across, as it were. So hopefully that will be a useful event for people. We've got a question about spectrum that's come through here. So what is the ecosystem readiness in 3.8 to 4.3 gigahertz spectrum allocated by Ofcom for private networks? What are the use cases or deployment models in this band? Who wants to take a stab at that one?
I guess that's really me. So the ecosystem is growing. It's not enormous. And as with any other kind of spectrum, it's really based on demand. There is availability in PCIe, everything from PCIe cards up to tablets. And PCIe cards up to tablets and telephones. Use cases are everything from AR, VR, HoloLens, mobility, autonomous vehicles, IoT, variety of things. It really is, private networks are very custom tailored, and therefore things that are in the private networks range, which is 3.8 to 4.2, are very custom tailored. Oftentimes what we have to do for our customers is look for a user equipment that actually fits the use cases and requirements that they have. As an example, I'm working now with a manufacturing company, and they're looking at AGVs for across their factory. And we are looking for very specific devices that actually fit their solution. So it is growing. It's something that UK5G has been involved in, trying to promote that. Yeah, that's what it is.
Brilliant, thank you.
Kenny has more.
Yeah, just to add to that. So we've got 3.8 gig radios deployed at testbed sites, 4 different testbeds across the UK now, and we're mainly running them for fixed wireless access use cases. So there's two slight issues with the band. So in terms of a base station blasting out power, the license that Ofcom is able to supply for the shared access is pretty low power. So that's one factor. That means that the base station's sort of downlink coverage is not going to go very far. And the other issue is because it's quite a high frequency band, if you've got something like a smartphone handset, it's really going to struggle to get from the phone back to the base station at distances more than about a kilometer or so. This is one of the slight issues with 5G standalone and the higher frequencies, because if you've got your uplink and your downlink only happening in that higher frequency band, then that's your bottleneck. You're limited to your coverage is limited to how far the phone can go from the base station. If you're doing something like 5G NSA, where you've got a bit 4G in there too at lower frequencies, you can stretch the coverage far further.
That's true. And it's something actually we've raised with Ofcom through UK5G and actually separately through Cellnex, is sometimes the power, which is either low or medium power granted by Ofcom, is not fit for purpose. So we're really trying to draw their attention to where the deployment is. Does it really need to be low power? Can we have a higher power? Yeah. So that's something that I know is under consideration.
Yeah, brilliant.
But you're absolutely right, Kenny.
Sorry, Kenny, I think this one is for you as well. So with regards to Volt, does this mean that MNOs are a better option for the general public than virtual MNOs when it comes to quality of calls?
Yeah, Volte provides better call quality, digital, higher bandwidth, all that kind of stuff, but there's not a great deal of difference. If you do the circuit bridge fallback, it'll just be a bit muffly.
Brilliant, thank you. And then the final question that we've had come through on the chat, and Catherine, I'm probably going to come to you first on this one. Does anyone have an example of a local authority building a neutral host network as part of a housing development?
I don't.
Okay. Yeah,
I don't.
haven't
Sorry.
heard one either.
No. Kenny?
So as I said in my slides, the first UK operator to play with neutral hosting, with like real neutral hosting, is Virgin Media O2.
Yeah.
And they only just started the tail end of last year. So it's going to be some time before we start seeing this sort of out and about.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you everyone for a really great set of questions there covering a variety of different things. So that's great to have those questions and inputs, thank you. We have a little bit of time left before we conclude. And so there's a few questions that I wanted to put to the group. So firstly, and I put this kind of to all of you, we've talked about a lot of different options today. There's a lot of different things to consider when thinking about sort of securing connectivity and advanced connectivity for specific places. How do local authorities decide on the best route for their needs? So what really should they be considering in the first instance?
I think they should be considering what problems they want to solve. Instead of looking at it from a connectivity perspective, what are the issues they want to solve? Is it a connectivity poverty? Is it safety? Is it flow through of traffic through the center of town? Look at the problem first, and then talk to a service provider or go to UK5G or DCMS and talk about what solutions there are. As Kenny said earlier, if you're looking at a small area indoors, Wi-Fi makes sense. If you're looking at a larger area, there are other things that make more sense: private networks, neutral host, etc. So start with the problem.
Kenny, anything to add from your perspective?
I'll just do a wee pitch for the 5G New Thinking Toolkit. So the main output of the 5G New Thinking project we're working on is to develop a toolkit, which is basically aiming to arm a rural community with all the information that they need to figure out, funding models, use cases, what technologies they might want to do, spectrum, all that kind of stuff. We're building this at the moment, and it will be released in hopefully a couple of weeks' time. So yeah, probably the biggest hurdle to get over is understanding your exact use cases, because when you figure out your use cases and know what you want to do, the technology falls into place. If you go in saying, right, I'm going to build my 5G standalone network, and then go, okay, I want to do neutral hosting. Well, as I've described, you're going to encounter a lot of problems. So you need to figure out your use cases first.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, that's really helpful. And you referenced there kind of rural areas, Kenny. From your perspective, with the new developments and new opportunities and models that come with 5G, what specific kind of opportunities or considerations does that throw up for rural areas that perhaps is different from kind of suburban or urban areas?
So not necessarily blinkers on 5G, a little bit 4G as well.
Yeah.
The main thing that is sort of a benefit for rural areas is the MNOs have kind of abandoned you a little bit. You know, there's marginal coverage when you get to rural communities. And as a result of that, there's a lot of spectrum available. So while there's the shared access band, such as the 3.8 band and the little slithers at other places, which is available UK-wide on a first-come, first-served basis, we also have what's called the local access license. And this is slightly more expensive, and you'll find it a bit of a battle to get the license application to go through. But it will give you basically access to any mobile operator band in your community that's not being used. So, you know, all the operators own spectrum at 700 megahertz, 800 megahertz, 900 megahertz, 1800 megahertz, 2100 megahertz, etc. There's this massive amount of spectrum, and in a rural community, they could be deploying nothing. So you can say, right, I want long distance coverage. So I want to apply for 700 megahertz license here, and you go through the motion, you'll get it. And because you're in your rural community, there's a very high chance that the MNOs will not be deploying there anytime soon. So that gives you some sort of business reassurance.
Brilliant, thank you. I've had another question that's come through in the chat, and Jessam, I might throw this one to you to get your take on this. But the question essentially saying, what should local authorities do to try and encourage MNOs to build in their areas?
Sure. Yeah, very tough one. Because on the one hand, MNOs will be commercially driven, will be driven by the need. A lot of the time, it's the need for capacity as well as coverage, which will mean population density is key, which will mean that rural areas. I see the conundrum. I would probably reach out to DCMS Combined Authority or the local government association, and we can start to see what we can do to put that sort of plan in place. Because while they are commercially driven, they do understand that they are trying to achieve the government's targets. So we'll see if there's something a little bit more niche that we can work out, if it's across a larger rural area or not. I guess the first, I don't have a silver bullet for that one, but I guess the first answer would be just to talk and to ask those at the likes of UK5G and us and your combined authority, just to see if a strategy can be put into place. Because I do sympathise with that a great deal, that situation. I imagine it comes up a lot across the country. So yeah, just reach out and we'll try and set something up is probably the best answer I can give for that one.
Brilliant, thank you. And just to kind of build on that one as well, the next event that we have next Tuesday, the 8th of March, is looking particularly at how to secure inward investment. We will have speakers from Sunderland who've been very successful in doing this, and we will hear from the Infralink programme in Scotland, who's also doing a lot of great work in this space as well. So if anyone is particularly interested in the answer to that question, then do still sign up for next week's event, where we will be covering that. So one final question that I want to kind of come to each of you in turn on, which is really, as I say, we've heard a lot today. What's the one key thing that you would like our audience to leave today's event sort of understanding or thinking about? And Catherine, I'm going to come to you first, please.
I think I'm going to repeat what I said before, which is understand your problems.
Yeah.
And then reach out to someone, multiple service provider, UK5G, DCMS, to figure out the best way to solve it, which might not just be one way. Yeah. I guess that's the first thing. And then I'm going to steal Jessam's one, which is there is funding out there all over the place. You have to dig around, but look for funding.
Brilliant, thank you. Kenny, going to come to you next.
Okay, so my big takeaway is probably, as has just been posted in the chats here, business models are changing. You know,
yeah.
Up until kind of the last few years, the players have basically been the mobile operators and corporate building small campus networks, or whatever. but we're now at a point where, you know, spectrum is becoming democratized, if you like. You know, you'd be able to get access to spectrum if you want it. With push towards Open RAN and sort of more vendors starting to produce equipment and the whole RAN diversification thing, building these networks is going to become cheaper. And you know, with the likes of neutral host, it will come in the next couple of years. Suddenly we're going to see a shift towards the national operators being like one service that you get in the UK, and then third-party network operators on behalf of the national operators or whatever are going to be this new entity that's going to exist.
Brilliant, thank you. And Justin, last but not least, coming to you.
I would say don't suffer in isolation or in silence, basically.
Yeah.
So if you're not sure where to start, or if actually you've developed a fair bit of a digital connectivity strategy and you are somewhere along, but you're just thinking about the next step, ask fellow councils, ask ADEPT, ask local government association, ask your combined authority, ask a sub-regional partnership that you work with. The chances are, if someone doesn't have an idea of best practice, they will be able to speak to someone who can speak to us, who speak to those in the industry, and some of the people that we speak in events like this, and we can start to formulate a strategy that works across a region. So just ask the question. I think it's the main thing that I would say.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you to all our speakers and panelists today as well. Really appreciate you sharing your kind of inputs, and thank you to our audience for being so engaged and asking so many great questions as well. That's always really great to see, so thank you. The final point I'll leave you with is we've touched on these actually already a little bit, but we do have 2 more events in the series. So same time next week, successfully attracting inward investment. And then the final event in the series is on the 15th. So again, 9:30 on a Tuesday, where we'll be looking at that kind of effective partnerships between public and private sector. As we have today, the idea of both those events is that they will be very kind of honest, open and pragmatic. So if you are interested in those topics, have either perspectives and thoughts to share, or would like to learn more about them, please do sign up. You'll find the link on the UK5G website. The final point to say, and I'm hoping that somebody will be putting the link to this in the chat as we speak, is that your feedback is really important to us. We do have a survey about your thoughts and perspectives on today's event. We'll be sending this out by email afterwards. If you do have 2 minutes, please do take the time to fill it in. We're interested in understanding not just your thoughts on this event and how we can make these better in the future, but also potential other topics or areas that you would like us to explore in future event series. So yes, I can see the link to that is in the chat. So yeah, please do take the time to fill that in. It will help us to make sure that we're developing ever better and more relevant and appropriate content for you. So thank you very much for all of your attendance this morning. We will be circulating copies of the slides. We have recorded the event, and we will be sharing, publishing the recording on the UK5G site. For those of you who maybe missed the first event where we delved into the 5G testbed and trials program but would like to catch up, the recording of that will be going up on UK5G this week as well, so you can catch up on that if you missed it. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. Have a great day, and I hope to see some of you for the upcoming next 2 events as well. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.